What if one practice session completely changed the future of the Browns quarterback room? Not a game, not a press conference, not a viral interview, just one day at camp, and suddenly everything felt different. Because the moment Shedeur Sanders stepped onto that field, the energy shifted, conversations changed, and a quiet competition turned into a full-blown storyline that nobody could ignore. Dillon Gabriel showed up expecting a normal camp environment: install the offense, run the reps, execute the system, handle business. He came in focused, prepared, and confident that he'd compete for the job the traditional way. But what he didn't expect was to walk into a situation where the spotlight would instantly tilt away from him. Shedeur didn't walk in loud. He didn't demand attention. He didn't talk trash. He just started throwing passes that made people stop what they were doing and watch. Clean releases, tight windows, deep balls that didn't float. They arrived on time and on target. And that's when it stopped feeling like routine practice. It became uncomfortable. Every rep suddenly felt like a comparison. Every throw felt like it was being silently graded by teammates, coaches, and anyone standing near the sideline. You could feel the tension build. The type of tension that only shows up when something important is shifting. Because this wasn't just about arm strength or accuracy anymore. This was about presence, confidence, command, who looked built for pressure, who carried themselves like the moment already belonged to them. And from the first series of reps, Shedeur moved differently. Calm in the pocket, comfortable under pressure, moving with the kind of composure that usually takes years to develop at the NFL level. That's when the whispers started. Did Shedeur really look that sharp? Was Dillon struggling, or was he getting overshadowed by someone playing at a completely different speed? Those questions didn't stay quiet for long. Clips started circulating. Fans picked sides. Media outlets leaned in. And suddenly the Browns' quarterback competition wasn't just internal anymore. It became a public spectacle happening in real time. Because when a rookie quarterback walks into camp and instantly changes the mood of the entire building, that's not normal. That's not coincidence. That's the beginning of something bigger. And what happened next didn't just affect reps. It started changing how people inside the organization were thinking about the future. It didn't take long for people to realize this wasn't a normal quarterback battle. From the first few series, the difference in energy was obvious. Dillon Gabriel was running the offense the way you'd expect. Efficient, structured, safe. He looked like the steady option, the guy who keeps things on schedule and avoids mistakes. But when Shedeur stepped in, the entire pace changed. The ball came out faster. Routes looked sharper. The tempo picked up without anyone calling for it. And that's when teammates started paying attention. Not because coaches told them to, not because of depth chart politics, just natural reaction. Receivers began adjusting their routes differently. Linemen held blocks a second longer. Defensive backs stayed locked in after plays ended. Everyone could feel that the reps mattered more when Shedeur was under center. You could see it in the body language. Heads turning, players drifting closer to watch his throws, conversations stopping mid-sentence. The type of quiet focus that shows up when someone is doing something you don't see every day. He wasn't forcing big plays. He wasn't trying to be flashy. He was just stacking clean reps back to back, showing control over the offense instead of reacting to it. Meanwhile, Dillon was dealing with a different kind of pressure. Every throw suddenly felt heavier, not because he was playing poorly, but because comparisons were happening in real time. When one quarterback starts building momentum, the other one starts feeling the weight of expectation. It's subtle at first. A missed window here, a late read there, but it adds up quickly when the spotlight is shifting. And this is where the competition stopped feeling balanced, because it wasn't just about performance anymore. It was about who the team believed in, who looked comfortable running the offense, who felt like the natural fit. That belief doesn't come from stat sheets. It comes from feel, from rhythm, from presence. By the end of that session, it was clear something had changed. Not officially, not on paper, but emotionally. The quarterback room didn't feel neutral anymore. It felt tilted. And the wild part, The real shift wasn't happening with coaches or play calls. It was happening with the players themselves. And once that starts, it spreads fast. The real turning point didn't come from a coach's clipboard. It came from the huddle. Once Shedeur started stacking reps, something subtle but powerful began happening. Receivers naturally drifted toward him, not because of favoritism, not because of hype, but because the ball was arriving exactly where it was supposed to. On time, in stride, with confidence. Routes suddenly looked sharper, cuts were more aggressive, effort went up without anyone saying a word. That's what happens when players trust the quarterback. They don't slow down, they don't hesitate, they attack. And Shedeur's reps started feeling different. The chemistry looked real, not forced. You could see timing developing fast, even in early camp sessions. Meanwhile, Dillon's reps felt heavier. Not bad, just tense. The offense looked more mechanical. Players were focused on execution instead of flow. It's the difference between running a play and feeling a play. And when teammates sense that difference, they react instantly. Body language told the story. After Shedeur completions, guys stayed engaged. Quick nods, helmet taps, quiet reactions that signal respect. After Dillon's reps, the vibe felt more neutral. No drama, no conflict, just less electricity. And in a locker room, energy is contagious. Once it starts leaning one direction, it's hard to pull it back. That's when the cameras really started paying attention. Clips of Shedeur throwing deep balls, escaping pressure, and commanding the huddle began circulating. Fans noticed. Analysts noticed. Social media picked it up immediately. Suddenly, what was happening on the practice field wasn't private anymore. It became public conversation. And this is where things got dangerous for Dillon. Because you don't just compete with another quarterback at that point. You compete with momentum, with narrative, with online perception. And those battles are harder to win than any drill. Once the fan base starts leaning one way, pressure multiplies. Every rep becomes content. Every mistake becomes amplified. Every highlight gets replayed 10 times. And Shedeur was winning that battle without even trying to create it. But that wasn't the biggest problem yet. Because while the internet was reacting, something more serious was happening behind the scenes. Coaches were watching closely, and decisions were quietly starting to form. Once the clips hit social media, the situation exploded. What started as quiet camp buzz turned into a full-blown online debate almost overnight. Shedeur's throws were everywhere. Slow-motion breakdowns, highlight edits, side-by-side comparisons. Fans weren't just watching practice anymore, they were treating it like a weekly episode. And the narrative shifted fast. Early takes about Dillon being the safe option started fading. Instead, people began asking harder questions. Why does Shedeur look so comfortable already? Why does the offense seem more alive with him under center? Why does he move like the moment doesn't faze him at all? That online momentum mattered more than most people realize. Because public opinion doesn't stay online. It leaks into locker rooms. It shows up in press conferences. It creeps into how reps are evaluated and how performances are framed. When thousands of fans start pushing one name, that pressure becomes impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, Dillon was trending too, just not for the reasons any quarterback wants. Every missed throw got clipped. Every awkward rep got slowed down and analyzed. Suddenly, the margin for error disappeared. And that's brutal for any player trying to settle into a new system. The fan base split almost instantly. One side calling Shedeur the future, the other defending Dillon and warning people not to overreact. But the louder side was obvious. Shedeur's name kept dominating timelines. Hashtags formed. Memes flooded comment sections. It wasn't just hype. It was a movement building in real time. And here's the dangerous part. Once momentum becomes emotional, logic doesn't slow it down. Stats don't calm it. Context doesn't matter. People start believing in what they see and feel. And what they were seeing was Shedeur taking control of the spotlight without asking for it. At that point, this stopped being a normal quarterback competition. It became a perception battle, a branding battle, a pressure cooker situation where every rep carried double weight. But while fans were arguing online, something even more complicated was unfolding inside the building. Because reports started surfacing that the two quarterbacks weren't being handled the same way anymore. And that's when eyebrows really went up. That's when the reports started circulating. And while nothing has been officially confirmed, multiple outlets and insiders suggested the two quarterbacks were being developed very differently. According to speculation, Shedeur was being brought along in more controlled situations, structured reps, clean installs, a setup designed to build rhythm and confidence. Dillon, on the other hand, was reportedly being thrown straight into tougher defensive looks, more pressure, more chaos, more high-risk situations. Now, to be clear, there's no official statement saying this was intentional or unfair, but the optics raised questions. Because when two quarterbacks are competing, the environment they're placed in matters. One path builds momentum, the other tests survival. And when fans started connecting those dots, the conversation shifted again. Some people saw it as smart development. Others saw it as setting Dillon up to fail. Either way, it added another layer of tension to an already unstable situation. Suddenly, every rep wasn't just about performance. It was about context. Who had the harder assignments? Who was being protected? Who was being pushed? And here, where frustration allegedly started building. Because when you're the quarterback getting thrown into the fire while another guy is stacking smooth reps, it messes with your rhythm. It messes with confidence. You start pressing. You start forcing throws. You start trying to prove something on every snap instead of letting the game come to you. Meanwhile, Shedeur stayed steady. Same calm posture, same composed presence, no visible panic, no emotional reactions. He just kept executing and letting the momentum grow naturally. And the contrast became sharper with every practice. This is where quarterback battles often turn emotional. It's no longer about football alone. It becomes about pride, about perception, about who feels respected. And once that line gets crossed, things get uncomfortable fast. Because now Dillon wasn't just competing with Shedeur. He was competing with a narrative that was growing stronger by the day. And that's a fight very few quarterbacks ever win. And that pressure, it didn't stay quiet for long. It started showing up in body language, energy, and performance, which is exactly what happened next. This is where the gap really started to show. Not in arm talent, not in raw ability, but in how each quarterback handled the moment. Dillon Gabriel began carrying visible pressure. Every rep looked heavier. Every mistake felt amplified. You could see him trying to force rhythm instead of letting it come naturally. That's what happens when momentum starts slipping. You stop playing free. You start playing tight. Meanwhile, Shedeur looked untouched by the noise. Same calm walk to the huddle, same steady cadence, same relaxed posture before the snap. He wasn't rushing reads. He wasn't panicking under pressure. He moved like someone who expected the ball to move downfield every drive. That composure separated him fast. When the pocket collapsed, Shedeur didn't freeze. He slid, reset his feet, delivered throws with defenders closing in. When coverage disguised late, he adjusted without hesitation. Those are veteran traits, the kind coaches trust when games get ugly. And that trust matters more than raw stats in a quarterback competition. Dillon, on the other hand, was stuck fighting two battles at once. One against the defense, another against perception. That's exhausting. It drains confidence. And when quarterbacks lose confidence, decision-making slows down. Reads hesitate, timing slips, and the gap grows wider without anyone needing to say a word. By this point, it wasn't just fans noticing. Teammates felt it. Defensive players started reacting differently. After Shedeur completions, you saw respect. After Dillon reps, the energy stayed neutral. Not bad, just quieter. And in football, silence speaks volumes. This is when competitions quietly end long before any announcement is made. No press release, no official declaration, just a shift in belief. The type that shows up in meeting rooms, practice rotations, and sideline conversations. And once belief moves, it rarely comes back. Because now the Browns weren't just evaluating talent, they were evaluating leadership, command, who looked ready to carry the offense when the lights turn on for real, and the answer was becoming clearer with every snap. But the biggest impact of all this wasn't what happened on the field. It was what it meant for the season ahead, and that's where this story gets even more interesting. At this point, this isn't just about who throws the prettiest ball in practice. This is about direction, identity, and what the Browns want this offense to become. Because when momentum swings this hard in camp, it usually carries straight into the season. Coaches may not announce it publicly yet, but internally, decisions start forming fast. If Shedeur keeps stacking reps like this, it puts real pressure on the staff. Not media pressure, not fan pressure, football pressure. The kind that forces you to ask one question: who gives us the best chance to win right now? And based on what people inside the building are seeing, that answer is starting to lean in one direction. It also changes the locker room dynamic. Players naturally rally behind the quarterback they believe in, the one they trust to deliver on third down, the one they feel confident following when games get tight. That belief can't be coached. It develops organically, and once it's there, it becomes powerful. For Dillon Gabriel, this creates an uphill battle, not impossible, but steep, because now he's not just fighting for reps, he's fighting to reverse momentum. And momentum is the hardest thing to steal back in sports. Even solid performances won't erase the early perception shift unless something dramatic happens. For Shedeur, this is opportunity territory. Every practice becomes an audition. Every rep becomes a chance to solidify trust. If he continues showing composure, leadership, and command, the conversation won't be about development anymore. It'll be about readiness. And that's dangerous for defenses, because a quarterback playing with confidence changes the entire offense. Play calling opens up. Receivers run harder routes. Linemen protect with more urgency. Suddenly, the team doesn't just execute plays, it believes in them. But here's the twist. The Browns now face a delicate situation. Move too fast and risk backlash. Move too slow and risk wasting momentum. That balance will define how this season starts. And that brings us to the biggest question of all. Is this just camp hype, or are we watching the early stages of a full quarterback takeover? So now the real question isn't about one practice. It's about what this moment represents. Because quarterback battles don't usually flip this fast unless something deeper is happening. Shedeur Sanders didn't just show up and throw a few good passes. He walked into camp and changed the emotional temperature of the entire building. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens when confidence, preparation, and opportunity collide at the perfect time. Dillon Gabriel didn't fail. He didn't collapse. He didn't suddenly forget how to play football. But in elite competition, sometimes being solid isn't enough. Sometimes the other guy simply arrives with more momentum, more presence, and more command. And when that happens, the narrative shifts whether anyone wants it to or not. What makes this situation even more dangerous for the Browns is how early it's happening. This isn't late preseason drama. This isn't a last-minute decision. This is momentum forming at the very beginning of camp. And when belief builds early, it tends to carry forward. Coaches notice it. Players respond to it. Fans amplify it. Now, Shedeur still has to prove it when the lights come on. Practice dominance doesn't automatically guarantee game day success, but what it does show is readiness, comfort under pressure, leadership traits that can't be taught overnight. And if he continues stacking moments like this, the idea of him sitting quietly on the bench becomes harder to justify. Meanwhile, Dillon now faces the toughest challenge of his career, fighting momentum itself. Not just earning reps, not just executing plays, but changing perception in a room that already feels like it's leaning one way. That's a brutal position for any quarterback to be in. So here's the real takeaway. This doesn't feel like a normal competition anymore. It feels like the early stages of a shift, a turning point, a potential franchise moment that people might look back on and say, that's when it started. Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Shedeur Sanders is already taking control of this quarterback battle? Or is this just camp hype that will fade once real games begin? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to stay locked in on every update, every camp storyline, and every behind-the-scenes NFL moment, make sure you're subscribed, because this story is only getting bigger from here.